Ladies and gentlemen, I'll call to order the January meeting of the Oxford Planning Commission. Commissioners, you have before you the agenda. Are there any changes or additions, Ben? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any commissioners online? All right, agenda is approved. Commissioners, I hope you've had a chance to review the minutes from the December meeting. Does anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Ben, do we have a staff report?
Just a couple things of note. Just a reminder of the Planning Commissioner training on January 20th. I think I've emailed all of you, but if you have any questions or need anything, just let me know on that. And then the building official report, you'll notice, was not in your packet. They were mostly hit with COVID for the last couple weeks, so next month we'll have a report for January and February. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Note there is one administrative approval, I guess just to make it clear for developments that are, what's the square footage been, 5,000 square feet?
Correct.
Less than 5,000 square feet, it doesn't trigger the planning commission, but the planning staff and the site plan review committee considers it, so that one's been approved for the Burroughs Restaurant Group. Our first public hearing for the night is case 2818. Jeff St. Romain has filed a request for a variance from section 3.8.8 restaurants parking for property located at 1735 University Avenue. Okay.
This item was postponed from the December Planning Commission meeting. This property is the University Shopping Center. I think we're all quite familiar with it. It's the shopping center that has Alice & Company, Little Caesars, now Walk-Ons is down there, so several different businesses that are there. It's at the northwest corner of University and Bramlett. The center was acquired by University Shopping Center LLC fairly recently, within the past year or so, and improvements to the buildings and parking lot facilities have been installed. The applicant is Jeff St. Romain, on behalf of Walk-Ons, is hoping to install an outdoor dining facility, a patio, which is, I guess it would be on the east side of the building, and it would face out towards Bramlett Boulevard. The architect for University Shopping Center provided parking calculations for the various uses in the center when it was determined that the parking center as a whole has a 14 parking space deficit, not including the patron area for the proposed patio. As a result of this information, staff was not able to authorize the construction of the patio unless the Planning Commission were to grant a variance, and this variance would be for to remedy the nonconformity of 14 parking spaces plus allow the additional 6 parking spaces. So what you're talking about is a parking variance of 20 parking spaces, which you do see permission from the shopping center owner inside of your packet. I did note that in the report. The applicant states that they're requesting this variance because outdoor seating will activate an unsightly area and an unsightly and underused portion of this property. The patio will provide 38 additional outdoor dining seats. But as a result of that, it would require an additional 6 parking spaces to the center. The application notes that the Land Development Code was written before COVID and has before COVID has created impacts of businesses. And as a result of COVID, the application states that every restaurant needs the ability to spread out and have outdoor seating to remain open and during potential future outbreaks. It also notes the benefit of granting this variance is that it would reduce the amount of pavement in the city, thus allowing more green space and active spaces for the citizens to enjoy. They believe that this outdoor seating without increasing the parking has no negative impact and brings added value to everyone. Staff certainly acknowledges the impacts of COVID and the benefits of outdoor dining. You know, we did work with other countless businesses throughout the city to be able to provide outdoor dining during the pandemic. The applicant states that they believe that there is not a negative impact to allowing this. However, we have had conversations with adjacent business, the owners of Cheney's, in particular, prior to prior to today. Although today we have received one email correspondence that I provided to each of you and is a part of the record about concerns of how this added the added patron area, and honestly how the impacts of this business in the parking situation are impacting all of the businesses that are in there. So so I think that there were some concerns by business owners that there will be a negative impact, contrary to what the application states. While much of the parking in the University Shopping Center is shared between all of the business, Cheney's Pharmacy owns their own parking lot. So a lot of times it looks like it's all one parking area and people pull in and they park there, but that's not necessarily the case. That's private property specifically for Cheney's, and there's a concern by Cheney's that staff and patrons of walk-ons will utilize this. Staff's understanding that, you know, even when we were writing this, that there was the potential, or there were conversations being had between the property owners to try and work out an agreement. We still have not heard if an agreement has been secured. Staff does acknowledge that some of the businesses in the shopping center, I think that was one of the arguments that they were making in their application, is that that some of the businesses are maybe conducive to you know, to shared parking, and that they are a traditional 8 to 5 operation. So while one business is closed, they could take advantage of those parking spaces, which is not uncommon. And I think it's reasonable to say that in this instance, walk-ons, you know, while they are open during lunch hours, that the predominance of their business would be generated after 5 p.m. We did, myself, Robert, and Hollis Green, the Development Services Director, did meet on site with Walk-On's development team on November 19th. And I think it's important to point out that we did learn that approximately 40 employees work a typical shift, and that's concerning because the quantity of parking required for the restaurant based on the code calculations is 42. So given all these circumstances, staff's not able to support this request. We recommend denial of the variance for 20 parking spaces for the facility. I know there are several people. The development team is here, and they wish to speak. And I think there are some business owners from the shopping center that might also like to say a few comments.
Thanks, Ben. Before we hear from them, could you just briefly tell us how parking requirements are calculated for restaurants and taverns?
Yeah, so for it depends on the particular use. You know, retail tends to be based on gross floor area, while restaurants tend to be calculated based on patron area. In some instances, fast food takes into consideration a calculation based on a number of seats, like 1 parking space per 4 seats. But in this particular one, it was for the restaurant, it's 1 parking space per 100 square feet of patron area. And then in your packet, you can actually see a breakdown of the square footages of the various uses that are there. And I'm sorry, I have it over here. Of the various uses and what is required versus what is provided.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
Commissioners, any questions for staff or for the applicant?
Ben, just for clarification, the 20 spaces, that the shortage, is that including the proposed patio or not including?
So 20 does. So the existing facility right now has a shortage of 14 parking spaces without the outdoor patio.
Gotcha.
Based on the square footage of that outdoor patio, or the patron area of that outdoor patio, it would require an additional 6 parking spaces. Thus, you get 20 parking space deficiency.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a couple questions for the applicant. Please state your name for the record.
Benjamin Bradford with Street Collaborative. We're the walk-ons design team, not the developments design team, and I'm speaking on behalf of Jeff St. Romain and walk-ons.
Sure.
Stuart Paval is the architect for the development owner, and so y'all saw some of my emails and correspondence. So I'm here to talk about the parking numbers that I've shown for the development as a whole, since it's part of the packet, so it's part of the record. I need to speak to it.
Thank you. So my question's about the parking, and I guess the reason I led with the question about how parking's calculated is to see, how much of the detail of Walk-On's business model is taken into account in the parking estimate. So, the deficiency of 14 spaces is across the entire shopping center. And within that, if I got this right, Walk-On's requirement by code was for 42 parking spaces without the outdoor seating, right? And so the outdoor area would require an additional 6. And so two things come up to me. One is that staff said that a typical shift would include about 40 employees at Walk-Ons, is that right?
No, that was the first week. Since then, that is actually not the case. They're closer to probably about 30 or so. Okay. And a lot of them, they're actually encouraging, different modes of transportation to come in. So it's that doesn't necessarily relate to a car count, if you will.
Well, it may not be predictive of the count, but it relates to it, right? I mean, certainly the worse the weather, the more likely people are going to be to drive to their place of work, for example. So roughly 30 employees, unless they get busier, right? You said when they first opened, they had about 40.
When they first opened, we admitted that first week was kind of a rough week. Lots of people were training. Even deliveries were kind of rough. They weren't coming on time. And just a point to that is typically all deliveries would be after hours. They're not supposed to be before that.
Okay, so they've settled around 30 something. Okay. But still, potentially 3/4 of the required parking could be taken up by employees.
Well, I just to point out, I mean, that is speculative, right? To assume that 30 employees are 30 cars, but also, I mean, and this is a bigger conversation about ordinance, but it seems to me that the parking counts for employees should be cooked into the numbers of the parking required for a restaurant. And if it's not, then shouldn't it say somewhere else in the ordinance that you have to provide an additional spaces for this number of employees? But it doesn't say anywhere else in the ordinance. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there that
sure,
if it's not cooked into that number, then if I were the applicant, I would be saying it should be in the ordinance. Y'all have heard me say that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but we're also not talking about a site plan, we're talking about a variance, right?
Fair enough, yeah, sure. So, okay. So we're in a speculative world here, yeah.
And then part of the analysis included locations that would be outside of the peak hours for walk-ons. And I wondered if you took into account weekends, especially Saturdays, which I think would probably be heavy with traffic for walk-ons in the afternoons, more so than during the week.
Well, that's a good point, yeah. But I think you would also find that businesses that are typically open in the week are going to be closed on the weekend as well. But you're right, I did not do that analysis, but I think it would, I mean, I would guess it would probably trade out with businesses that are closed on the weekend.
Other questions?
Are there any parking limitations under the lease itself?
No, so the parking is a completely shared situation between all businesses, including Origin Bank, which is at the other end of the development, but all those are shared, so there's no allotted spaces. This was really a conceptual exercise to figure out how many spaces for the entire development are needed. They're not assigned. Did that answer?
Yes, that was the question.
Well, and Stuart points out Origin Bank, and it's different because it's actually its own separate property, but it does still have a shared agreement. So it's worth noting that.
Can I ask, is the UPS store, that's considered part of, that's not its own property, that is part of this?
It is, yeah.
I'm just asking because I went there the other day and I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to park to go there, to go in there.
Go ahead.
And Burger King, yes, the UPS store is a part of it, and it calculated as anyway, the Burger King is not part of the shopping center. It's not included in the calculation.
So it's square footage. I think there was some emails back and forth that they were not included. Its square footage is not included. Its parking is also not included. So it is its own thing out there that's not a part of it, yeah.
Okay.
And so I just to kind of finish my deal, and then I'll sort of step back, is in my analysis, and this is an architect, I'm not an urban planner or a parking specialist, but I'm running numbers and looking at businesses that are open, when they're heavy, when they're closed, or when they're light, and daytime and nighttime on paper using numbers. And I know there's anecdotal, testimony this might be different, but on paper, using the numbers that the ordinance tells us to use, I am coming up on daytime and nighttime with 30 spaces that should be available conceptually and extra, with businesses that are closed at night and businesses that are closed or light during the day. And that is conceptual, but that's kind of what I'm getting to. So that was what that chart was speaking to, and that's, I guess, what I'm here to speak to.
Well, and you keep talking about, is the goal for y'all to be lighter in the day and heavier at night? You're not hoping for a big lunch crowd every day?
That's traditionally how it always works out.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I actually have a couple of more things that I would like to just say. This shopping center was vacant for a very long time. So as new businesses come in, people do get used to certain things. So having a new person come in, and especially with a bunch of interest that we did have that first week, which we of course acknowledge that change is always difficult. And so as the development does continue to fill, these things will somewhat occur. But as I understand it, after that first week, I don't think that or as far as I understand it, that lot has not filled up. People maybe had to walk a little further, but that's not necessarily something that we're here to talk about. So I don't think it has filled up since then.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to speak either for or against?
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Watson. I am an urban planner. I have a consulting firm here in Oxford. The name of the firm is Bridge & Watson, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Brent and Laura Smith and Cheney's Pharmacy. I've got a little written report that I would like to hand out to you. What I want to do is I would like to offer a copy of my report into the record. The difference in the record copy, Ben, I hope I can trust you with that now. The record copy has a copy of my CV attached to it. I don't like to use the word expert, but since we're making a record, in my professional career, I've provided expert testimony on 25 to 30 different occasions in the field of urban and regional planning in both state and federal courts. Yes, thank you, Ben. Tonight, I want to touch on the technical issues that surround this variance application. I think when you get the document that Ben is kindly handing out, I don't think I have to tell you all where Cheney's Pharmacy is. You might find the second page of my document of interest in that it identifies Cheney's Pharmacy and the Cheney's Pharmacy parking lot that is immediately south of the pharmacy building. And of course, it's right there adjacent to the Walk-On's restaurant. So naturally, because Cheney's owns parking, which is literally right at the front door of Walk-On's, customers are inclined to park in the Cheney's parking lot. We're a driving society. We don't want to walk any further than we have to. So that's where people wish to park. And as I'll get into this a little later, that creates some problems for Cheney's Pharmacy. But I want to touch on the very specific issues, the burden of proof that the applicant must meet in order to have a variance granted. Of course, you know that your zoning ordinance identifies, beginning at section 9.4.1, identifies, I think, 4 different elements that are required. That first element is that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. The application fails on this point. There is nothing at all unique about this land or this building or this structure that would warrant a variance. What you ordinarily would find in a variance situation is if a piece of property had an irregular shape, or if it had unusual topography, or had some natural feature such as a majestic old tree that was in the way of complying with the language of an ordinance. You know, those are circumstances which might rise to the level of warranting a variance. That's not the case here. The only thing wrong with this piece of property is that it's simply not big enough to accommodate parking in order for the Walk-On's restaurant to have the intensity of use that they would like to have, you see. And that's, as we will get into another point, that is a circumstance that is brought about by the owner, not by the property. Quite frankly, at the time that Walk-On's decided to come to Oxford, and look, and I'm glad they're here. I have dined there. It's a good restaurant. You know, they certainly knew or should have known what the parking circumstances were. They presumably knew or should have known whether or not their business model involved outdoor seating and 6 additional parking spaces. But apparently, perhaps that wasn't the case because we're here dealing with this variance. The second point that must be met is that literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance. As I understand the plain language of the application, at least as I take their application and organize it under the requisite proof that's required, then their position with regard to COVID would seem to fall under this. However, that's not proof, and that's not sufficient proof for a variance, and here's why. While it is absolutely true that if we were to have a COVID outbreak to the extent that indoor dining were shut down, then outdoor dining is beneficial, but that's not the only option. Certainly curbside service is available and is a clear option. The other thing to consider in that regard is that if we had an outbreak such that the dining rooms were shut down, then the demand for parking falls dramatically. You know, then there's not a parking problem, you see. So it seems to me that the situation is such that the owner desires to have outdoor dining more so than the outdoor dining is needed as a result of COVID. That doesn't rise to the level of warranting the granting of a variance. The next point, that special conditions and circumstances did not result from the actions of the applicant. Well, in fact, they do. The mere desire to have a greater intensity of use than what they currently have is a direct desire of the applicant. Has nothing to do with the building, the structure, or the land. It has everything to do with the business model. The next point is that the granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. We have a situation here where there's no proof, none of the required proof to support the variance. If you hypothetically were to grant this variance, then you absolutely would be conveying to walk-ons a right that no one else enjoys. Every other property owner in the city of Oxford has to have the requisite number of parking places to match up with the intensity of the use of their land, unless they can qualify for, I think there's a provision for an administrative relaxation depending on certain circumstances. You hold everybody to that standard. And there's no reason why walk-ons should not be held to that standard. Another point that I want to make, and it relative to the nature of the findings that you all have to make, is that as the property currently exists, there is what appears to be a successfully functioning restaurant there, walk-ons. So among the findings is that, I want to get this just right. Give me just a second to find. That the variance is the minimum variance that would make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. I would contend that today, without the outdoor dining area, that the property is being reasonably used. I think there's a parking problem. We'll get into that in just a moment. But to that end, I don't see that a variance is necessary to bring about the reasonable use of that land, building, or structure. Now, I also believe that part of the application process, the owner addressed negative impacts. I can tell you, and Brent and Laura Smith are here, and they could tell you that there have been a significant number of negative impacts to their property. Their attorney, Ms. Ann Taylor, is going to speak to that in just a moment. I'm going to just touch on just a couple of things. Number one, since COVID, Cheney's business volume has increased significantly to the extent that Cheney's is seeing more customers, Cheney's is having more parking places utilized, and that's why some people drive by Cheney's and they see a parking lot and they say, oh, well, gee, Cheney's doesn't need all that parking. Why can't someone else use that parking? Cheney's does, in fact, need that parking. At 3:30 this afternoon, there were about 11 spaces at Cheney's that were not occupied. And that's with the security guards managing who parks in the Cheney's parking lot, okay, at 3:30. So the negative impact has been, of course, that Cheney's has had to go out and hire a security guard to reserve their parking spots for their customers. That's clearly a negative impact. There's no reason to grant a variance that worsens the situation or that creates a higher demand for parking because there's a shortage of parking. Mr. Chairman, you asked the right question about the number of employees versus the number of required parking spots. It doesn't make sense that a restaurant that is required to have 42 spaces, 30 of which would be utilized by employees. And sure, some days employees may carpool, they may walk to work depending on where they live, but you've got to plan parking for peak hours. People have to have a place to park. And that's a problem. And I'll give you an example. Quite frankly, I think that your ordinance probably is short on parking requirements. And as an urban planner, I'm not a fan of asphalt. I'm not a fan of having excess parking and that type of thing. But the Cheney's building is 6,000 square feet. According to your ordinance, the Cheney's would only require 20 parking spaces. Well, there's almost 20 employees at Cheney's this afternoon. So there's something off about the parking requirement with respect to the uses in that it's simply not providing enough parking. For a lot of years, Cheney's has been able to accommodate overflow parking from the library. You know, popular events at the library would push traffic over into Cheney's parking lot. Popular events at the pavilion would push parking over into Cheney's parking lot, and Cheney's has been always glad to accommodate the community in that regard. But we now have the situation where they're spending not a small amount of money to patrol that parking lot and keep it reserved. That's going to have effect on the pavilion use. You know, they're not going to be able to easily spill over into the Cheney's lot anymore. And that will also be true for the library. So this
Mr. Watson,
variance,
if I can I just summarize for a second and make one thing clear just for the record? So I've got 3 points. First, that the request doesn't meet the criteria for a variance in the code.
That's right.
All 4 that you detailed. Second, that the 6 spaces aren't the minimum remedy, in your opinion, to make the space useful. And then the third is that, and this is the point I wanted to make clear, the Cheney's parking lot is the property of Cheney's Pharmacy. And
that's right.
Not part of the parking lot where the spaces are calculated. Correct, Ben?
That's right.
And so your basic point there is that the overflow demand from the other parking lot is going to have an adverse impact on Cheney's property and business.
It's going to increase. You're going to increase the demand.
Yeah. Okay.
Think about this. The outdoor seating, the outdoor dining area will have 38 seats. The ordinance says it needs 6 spaces. If 38 people traveled there in 6 vehicles, how many people per vehicle are required? 6.33. That's not enough parking. You know, there's something out of balance, and that's kind of a separate issue from this variance. But my point is that I think the effect of the variance is going to be more significant than just 6 spaces. And I'm of the opinion, my professional opinion, that the evidence does not rise to the level of warranting a variance in this case. And I would ask that you would deny the application. At this time, Ms. Ann Taylor, representative of the Smiths, is going to come and say a few words.
Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
Yes, ma'am. Please come forward. Ben, would you distribute for? And if you would come forward and state your name for the record. And for the sake of time, I'd appreciate if you have new points to present.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Ann Taylor, and I'm a lawyer at the Jones Walker Law Firm in Jackson. And I'm here on behalf of Laura and Brent Smith also. So I won't cover the same material. I'd like you to flip over to the photos that I have in the back part of the folder. I just kind of want to show y'all what's going on at the shopping center. The first photo is from November the 27th, when Walk-Ons was having its training. They completely filled Cheney's parking on Saturday and Sunday of that weekend. The next photo is right in front of Cheney's, it was on December the 11th. There was a fight of some patrons from Walcombs. I believe one was maybe an employee, and two other people were in a fight, and the ambulance, fire truck, whatever. I just point that out. On Sunday, December the 12th, Chinese did not have any security that day. So Chinese opens at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. When they arrive, every parking space is taken. So let's see what happens the next Sunday. They arrive prior to opening at 1 o'clock, and every space is taken. Even though there are signs that says it's strictly Chinese parking. The next photo is in the applicant's application. They talk about how they're going to beautify the property, and Chinese has already done that. They have planted boxwoods, ginkgo trees, camellias, roses that will all grow along in this area, as well as they put up the fence because Walk-Ons put its side, you'll notice that door on the side, that's where you're supposed to take out. They put it on the side of the store right in front of Chinese parking. And the last picture is a copy of the invoice for the security that Chinese had for just the month of December. It's $2,900. So for those reasons and the other reasons brought up by Mr. Watson, we request that you deny the application for the variance.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion on the variance request from section 3.8.8 restaurants parking for property located at 17. I'm sorry. Yes, sir, please come forward.
My name is Ross Boatwright, and my daughter owns a beauty parlor or beauty salon in the shopping center. Now, they have taken all her parking, and she has a lot of elderly people, and they cannot park all the way down there by the bank or the UPS store and walk up there. They circle the parking lot for 15, 20 minutes trying to find a place to park. Now, they're fixing to put a workout center right in the corner where the old bird in the bush used to be, right next to Allison Company. It's going to take 7 or 8 spaces. It's going to open early in the morning and close late in the afternoon. That's going to be a 6 or 7 day a week thing. Now, Allison Company is right next door. They put a god-awful flower bed right in their front door, took one whole parking place. And then between Margaret's buildings, they put a handicap place here and a handicap place here and one spot in the middle. Now, I don't know who plans these things, but somebody not looking at the paperwork. Now, I've been in construction my whole life, and this is absurd the way they're doing. And you call the owners, and the response, well, we've got plenty of parking in the back. Well, a 70 or 80-year-old woman is not going to park and come in your business through the back door. Now, that's not right. Now, and then like I was down there working late one evening on her beauty parlor, and here's all these employees, they all parking around the back of the building. And now you got all these loiterers that are parking with them. And you've got a chain of employees, but then you got their buddies And I've witnessed with my own eyes, I'm not making this up. They're going in and they're bringing stuff out of the kitchen to feed this menagerie of people that's outside. Now, it's not gonna affect our money, but it's a hazard because you got scuzzy looking people. Well, who's gonna come up in here? You gonna send your wife up there and say, well, park in the back? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think these people, they've worked, and you know, they're good people, but they have worked to secure the almighty dollar. And when you say anything to them, you get this, it's not my problem. Well, it's somebody's problem. She's paid good money to be there. She's worked like the devil. You're talking about wait till they close. Well, sometimes she's open at 8 in the morning. Sometimes 10 o'clock at night, she's still doing some girl's hair. You know, she got a wedding. She may have as many as 10 people in there that afternoon. And she's got 5 other employees too, see? So the crowd is just astronomical. And then they come in. I going up there the other night. I had to park down by the bank and walk to her place because there was nothing. And when they close the UPS store, it's going to become a Dunkin' Donut. Now you're going to have traffic backed up the square just like you do out there at Popeyes.
Yes, sir.
You know?
I appreciate the predicament.
So anyway, y'all need to think about some of this stuff. There's other people involved here than some megalopolis going to make $9.something million if he can manage to sell it.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Would anyone else like? Yes, sir.
Benjamin Bradford with Street Collaborative again. We did want to, after looking at sort of the documents tonight and acknowledging sort of that there is an issue of parking convenience for this particular spot. So we'd like to at least make the offer to Cheney's in that group that to offer signage like parking, this is Cheney's parking only, towed components, to at least alleviate that. Because we can do that, even though it's not our property, it is adjacent to us. It is a parking issue of convenience, right? Because everybody does want to be as close as they possibly can. So we just,
Okay. Yeah.
there's one sign. We're willing to do every other spot if necessary. Just to
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Anyone else who hasn't spoken who has a new point to be raised? All right, so at this time, unless there's another question from the commission, I'll entertain a motion on the variance.
I'll move that we deny the variance.
I have a motion to deny. Is there a second? There is a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Commissioner Murphy, how do you vote?
Vote yes to deny.
Thank you, sir. The variance is denied. All right, our next case is public hearing for case 2820. St. John the Evangelist Church has filed a request for a variance from section 5.8.4.3 for property located at 403 University Avenue. Robert.
All right, so the subject property is located on the north side of University Avenue, adjacent to the university. The property is about 2 and change acres and is located in the TNR district. It's in the NCO Neighborhood Conservation Overlay, as well as the South Lamar Historic District. The original site plan was approved in 2005. It has been amended 3 times in 2007, 2010, and most recently in 2017. There's a case history in the packet. The applicant is requesting a variance to exceed the maximum lot coverage so that a church residence may be constructed. For the record, any new construction will require a COA from Historic Preservation, as well as a site plan amendment and a special exception for the use of a residence in association with the religious assembly use. So the neighborhood conservation requirements have 2 subsections that govern neighborhood residential lot coverage. First is 40% for properties zoned SMF or NR, and then second is 50% for lots with detached dwellings in an SMF or in our district. And so despite the fact that this would be a detached dwelling, the residence would be directly associated with the church and is located on church property that is currently used for church activities. Staff's position is that the entire site should be considered as a whole and that the 40% lot coverage maximum should apply. The site as it currently exists has a coverage of about 52.5%, which is over the 40% requirement. This site has been in excess of the 40% requirement since it will lease a 2010 site plan amendment. And so this request is for the expansion of the existing nonconformity. The plan proposed by applicant indicates impervious coverage for the entire site to be 53.74%, which is about 1% greater than existing conditions. The criteria for the variance are that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same district, that the literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district, that the special conditions and circumstances do not result from actions of the applicant, and that in granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other land structures or buildings in the same district. The applicant states that strict application of the 40% standard would create an undue hardship for the church and its congregation, as well as the priest serving the church and congregation, because this is an essential function of the use of the church. The residence is intended to be constructed in a way that will be in harmony with adjacent houses, making it part of the existing neighborhood. The applicant has minimized the request by making the driveway for the proposed residence out of pervious pavers. Additionally, the area dedicated to the residence has impervious coverage of 26.6 according to staff calculations. That could be a little bit different. Staff recognizes that the proposed residence furthers the mission of the church and that the variance requested has been minimized, but staff does not see the required hardship of the materials as presented, but should the commission wish to grant this request, staff has 4 conditions as listed. In the case report, the applicant's engineer is here with supplemental material.
All right. Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question I just didn't understand.
Yes.
They're building this house and garage, but it's only going up 1%.
Yes. So
how's that?
So they are removing sidewalk, existing impervious material.
That's a tiny little piece of sidewalk, though.
It is. So it's a tiny little bit, but they're with the house and the garage together. It's only about 1,500 square feet, something like that.
It might be a little more than that.
It's about 2,100 for both.
Okay,
Yeah, it's like 1,800 and 300 or
So
something like that.
percentage-wise, that just goes up 1%.
Right, because it's a 90,000 square foot lot.
I did the calculation. It's like 2.2% without the sidewalk. Yeah.
I was counting on you.
Sorry, was there another question? Paul, did you want to say something?
Well, I think Robert's outlined it pretty well, but and he may have mentioned this, but I just do want to make sure that everybody understands the excuse me, I'm fogging up here. The applicant, and Paul Cushioning with Precision Engineering, representing the applicant. So the applicant is willing to, and we've indicated on the documents with this submittal or with the application, that they would spend some additional funds to make the driveway constructed out of some sort of pervious material to try to help offset the slight increase in impervious area that we're looking at. And I did receive some additional information from Father Joe, the priest for the Catholic Church today. I don't know if Ben forwarded that on to the commissioners, but basically just outlining some additional kind of thoughts that he had that really, in our opinion, does kind of classify this as somewhat of a unique request because of the nature of the church, and trying to accommodate canon law, which, as Father Joe points out here, doesn't require, but I think it encourages the priest to stay on the church property at all possible, or at least close to the church. And that may be what Ben's handing out here. I mean, you could glance through that, but again, it's some thought process from the church's perspective that really helps to understand why they really feel the strong need to have this use on the campus. And so again, it's not 100% critical for the church's operations, but much more convenient for them, and would make a lot of sense for them to be able to do this. And again, it is a slight increase in impervious area, about 1%.
Thank you, Paul.
And also to that point, and I guess, we could debate whether this should fall under the section that requires 40% impervious area or 50%. If you're single-family detached units in NR, then you are allowed 50% coverage, which makes our variance seem slightly less, although I can't really argue with Ben and Robert's position that perhaps this should fall under the other category. I guess I could sort of argue either way, but so I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I think, the staff report's well presented, and I think that being a church in a residential district, maybe it gets judged a little more harshly than it might be otherwise. I think there's also, at least to me, there's a housing angle on this, where we've been pressing for more affordable housing, and this is a chance for the church to provide housing for their own staff. I don't know, is there yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't there a house there before?
I think there were two homes.
Two homes there before,
maybe
right?
10, 12, 15 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when that changed, but there were two homes there. And I think it's worth pointing out that even though we are slightly exceeding the impervious area that's allowed in this zoning district, the more institutional use, the church itself proper is sort of a condensed use on the back part of the property. I say back, kind of back of where this home would be constructed. But if you look at the site plan that we submitted with the application, there's going to be a lot of open green space along the frontage street. This home, we set the setback so it's consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood, which is consistent with what the overlay district requires as far as setback for the home. So we've tried to place this in a way that it feels like part of the neighborhood, and I think more than just the structure being part of the neighborhood, we feel, the church feels it's important for their pastor or their priest to be part of the neighborhood.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on the variance from section 5.8.4.3 for property located at 403 University Avenue.
I'll move to approve the variance.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We need to. Yes, I'm sorry, with staff conditions, yes.
Motion with staff conditions, is that seconded? Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Commissioner Murphy, how do you vote?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. It is approved. Thank you, Paul. Our next public hearing is for case 2821. Petty Hardin has filed a request for preliminary and final plat approval for Goshen Express Car Wash Subdivision for property located on Highway 6 eastbound near County Road 305.
Okay, the subject property is located on the south side of Highway 6 between Waller Funeral Home and Centerpoint Energy. The applicant was granted a special exception to allow the proposed use of a car wash at this location. A site plan for that car wash with vacuums is currently under review. In this case, applicant is requesting preliminary and final plat approval. The subject property measures 1.77 acres. The proposed subdivision is of one lot. The proposed lot meets the dimensional requirements of the underlying zoning, but subdivision covenants have not yet been received, and it will be required prior to the issuance of permits. Engineering has provided comments, mostly towards cross-access easements, which will need to be shown on the plat, and the existence of a water line that needs to be raised. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary and final plat for Goshen Express Car Wash Subdivision with the 7 conditions that are listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Robert. I just have one question / concern, and it's not directly relevant to the plat, but it might be relevant to the conditions, and that's access to Highway 6. I wonder if staff or engineering staff would have any problem to amending condition 3 for the cross-access easements to include north and south as well, so that it would give access to County Road 305 potentially if we needed that for access. Right now, it just says. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I do not think we would have any objection. I'm pulling it up very quickly just to be sure. And that area is also along Front Highway 6 is managed by MDOT. But the county road at the rear would be the city. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, I guess my point, and I think you got this, but the way the condition reads, it's just cross-access east and west, so presumably for the
Front road.
For the front access. But, you know, the 1.77 acre lot doesn't go all the way through to frontage on County Road 305. So if down the road we needed access to 305, it'd be nice to have that easement in place.
Yes, I have no objection to that amendment.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on case number 2821.
Motion to approve with staff conditions?
Is that with my amendment?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions, including the amendment to condition 3. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Commissioner Murphy, how do you vote?
Aye, yes.
Thanks, sir. It is approved. Our final case is case number 2822. David Blackburn has filed a request for final plat amendment for Magnolia Park Subdivision Lot 5 for property located at 1801 West Jackson Avenue.
Now, I'm gonna recuse myself from this one.
Okay, thank you. Let the record show that Commissioner Milam is recusing himself. Be sure you return for the adjournment.
I think we're all familiar with the Magnolia Park subdivision, but we might know it a little differently. It's the property that includes the Highland Court development, like Orange Theory Fitness, I think the cookie company over there, but it also includes the storage units that are in the back. It includes the, I think there's an AT&T store and maybe even the McDonald's. And on the Anderson side of the road, there's a storage unit complex there. And maybe this is an amendment that should have happened years ago. Nonetheless, it's before us right now. Lot 5 encompasses the storage units that front out towards Anderson Road. It encompasses all of the Highland Court development, and the applicant is proposing to create an additional lot, Lot 7. So the request here is to make a modification to amend the subdivision to create the property. There's a meets and bounds description that exists right now for the storage units on Anderson. That would become Lot 5, and that would measure approximately about 3.315 acres. The existing shopping center, as we know it, less what will become Lot 7. So Lot 6 will be 3.868 acres, and then creating an additional lot, so that one piece that's undeveloped at this point, and that would be Lot 7, and that would measure just under a half an acre. So
That is undeveloped.
it is undeveloped. There was originally a plan for a building that was there, but at this point it would be taken out and it could be developed. And you'll see engineering did provide comments about, you know, we have cross-access easements that are required for each of the lot now that it would be a separate ownership, so that way it could appropriately, you know, utilize that property. Utility services for Lot 6 and 7 were planned for the Highland Park site plan, and that infrastructure is in place. Stormwater requirements for Lot 6 and 7 were provided as part of that site plan, and so should there be a development on Lot 7, so long as it does not exceed the roughly 4,800 square feet as previously planned, then it can maintain what was approved with that existing infrastructure as indicated in here. So staff recommends approval of the requested modification with the following conditions that are listed. There's 4 in here in your report.
Thank you, Ben. Just a question to make sure it's on the record, but the new lots 6 and 7 are owned by a different property owner than 5, so the proposed lot line between 5 and 6 follows the meet and bounds of that property line, is that right?
Paul's nodding head, yes.
Honestly, this was not, even though this overall plat amendment was not on our radar when we started this process, the original intent was just to carve out lot 7 from, what is indicated here is lot 7, from the overall shopping center, so that could be sold as its own fee simple parcel. And in that process, we discovered that the old commercial subdivision for Magnolia Park had never been modified, as it probably should have years ago. And I don't even know when that transfer of title was done, that separated lot 5 into what we're now calling lot 5 and 6 and 7. So really, this is just cleaning that up. I mean, the property that lot 5 owner currently owns is not changing at all. It's actually a client of ours also. So, and they're aware of this. I spoke with them early on in this process about exactly this, really just a cleanup kind of paperwork item, which again was driven by trying to carve out this parcel for the corner up there, which is undeveloped other than the parking. There is a pad there that's ready for a building. And we have a client that's looking at a small coffee shop, but you'll probably see that next, although it probably falls under the threshold to come to your, but anyway.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions? All right. There's nobody in the audience. So, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on case number 2822.
Motion to approve staff recommendations.
Motion to approve with staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor? Commissioner Murphy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. It is approved.
All right, thank you.
Paul. That is the end of the agenda. I let the record show that Commissioner Milam has returned. Commissioner Milam, do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Yes. Yes.